The man had more money than he could ever spend, yet every night his house felt empty. From the outside, the place looked perfect. Tall gates, quiet gardens, shining floors, and rooms that echoed with silence. People in the city spoke about his success with respect and envy. They said he was lucky. They said he had one life. But none of them heard the sound that filled his nights, the constant crying of his young son. The boy was small, still learning how to speak clearly, still afraid of the dark. Since his mother passed away, his cries had changed. They were no longer simple tears for food or sleep. They were heavy, painful sounds, filled with fear and confusion. The father tried everything. Doctors checked the child and said he was healthy. Therapists came and went, offering advice that sounded good but never worked. Toys were bought in piles, filling rooms that the child refused to enter alone. At first, the father believed money would fix it. It always had before. When a problem appeared, he solved it with resources, with speed, with control. But this was different. Every time his son cried, something inside him tightened. He wanted to help, yet he didn't know how. When he picked the boy up, the crying only grew louder. When he spoke, his voice sounded strange, like it didn't belong there. Nannies were hired one after another. Some stayed a week. Some stayed only a day. A few tried hard, but eventually they all left. The child screamed whenever new faces appeared. He refused to sleep unless he was exhausted from crying. Nights turned into long battles, and mornings felt heavier than nights. The father began sleeping less. He would sit in his home office late at night, staring at screens without reading them. His work still ran smoothly, but his heart was no longer in it. Meetings felt pointless. Deals felt empty. He found himself counting hours instead of money, waiting for the day to end and the night to begin. Even though nights were the hardest, sometimes he stood outside his son's room listening. He wanted to go in, but fear stopped him. He feared doing something wrong. He feared making the pain worse. Most of all, he feared that his son blamed him. Even though the boy was too young to understand blame, the house staff moved quietly, careful not to disturb either of them. They spoke in low voices, avoided eye contact, and followed routines like machines. Everyone felt the tension. It was a home filled with luxury, but lacking warmth. The father remembered a time when laughter filled the rooms. His wife had been the heart of the house. She knew how to calm the child with a soft song, how to smile even on hard days. After her death, the music disappeared. The walls seemed to absorb the sadness and reflect it back. The boy often woke up screaming from dreams he could not explain. When the father rushed in, the child pushed him away, crying harder. That rejection hurt more than any business loss the man had ever faced. He would step back, feeling useless, feeling like a stranger in his own home. One evening, after another long day, the crying began again. The father stood still in the hallway, his hand shaking slightly. He told himself to be strong, but strength had failed him before. He finally turned away and went downstairs, unable to face it in the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water and stared out the window. He wondered how his life had come to this. How could a man who controlled companies across countries fail at comforting his own child? That night, after the crying finally stopped, he sat on the edge of his bed and admitted something to himself for the first time. He was lost. Not financially, not socially, emotionally. He had no map for grief, no guide for fatherhood alone. The next morning, he made a decision. He would bring someone new into the house, not another highly trained expert, but someone ordinary, someone who might bring a different kind of presence. He didn't know why he felt this way, but something inside him told him that what they needed could not be bought from a fancy agency. Days passed, and the routine continued: crying, silence, guilt. The father watched his son play alone, often holding the same small object that had once belonged to his mother. The boy rarely smiled. When he did, it faded quickly, like a memory that didn't want to stay. The man began to notice small things. His son was afraid of sudden movements. He reacted strongly to loud voices. He calmed slightly when someone sat near him without speaking. These details had been missed before, buried under frustration, and exhaustion. Still, nothing truly changed. The nights remained long. The house remained cold. The father remained distant, not by choice, but by fear. One afternoon, sunlight filled the living room. The father watched his son fall asleep on the floor, tired from crying. The sight broke him in a quiet way. He knelt down and covered the boy with a light blanket, careful not to wake him. In that moment, he realized that his child didn't need perfection. He needed presence. Yet presence did not come easily to a man who had spent his life running, solving, and controlling. Sitting still felt like failure. Listening felt like weakness. But now, weakness was the only honest thing left. The father stood up and looked around the room. The toys, the space, the silence. He felt a deep ache in his chest, a mix of regret and hope. He didn't know it yet, but his life was standing on the edge of change. Somewhere beyond the gates of his perfect house, a simple woman was living her ordinary life, unaware that her calm nature would soon enter this broken home. She did not know the man. She did not know the child. And yet, her presence would soon touch them both. For now, the house waited. The father waited. The child slept, holding his tears inside. And the first quiet step toward healing was about to begin. The new woman arrived quietly one morning. She carried no luxury, no grand title, and no expectation beyond doing her work. She had seen homes full of noise and chaos before, but this one was different. Even the air felt heavy, as if every corner held memories of sadness. The father did not speak much to her at first. He watched from a distance, unsure if he trusted anyone with his son. The child was cautious. His eyes, wide with suspicion, followed her every move. He had learned to reject strangers, to push them away with the intensity of someone who had been hurt and left alone. But she did not flinch. She smiled softly, knelt gently to his level, and let him come to her if he wanted. She did not try to force interaction, and that made the boy curious at first. The father thought she might fail like everyone else. She cleaned quietly, organized things carefully, and spoke in calm tones. She noticed the small details. No one else did: the favorite blanket hidden under the sofa, the tiny footprints near the window, the way the boy twisted his fingers when anxious. It seemed trivial, but these little observations mattered. One afternoon, the boy began to cry for no obvious reason. The father felt the familiar tightness in his chest, ready to run into the room and pick up his child. But something held him back. The woman stepped forward instead. She crouched near the boy, speaking softly, her voice steady but full of warmth. She did not demand that he stop crying. She did not offer toys or distractions. She just sat there, patient and present. The child's cries were loud and urgent at first. He flailed, tossed, and refused her touch. Yet, she remained still, giving him space to release his emotions. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, his body relaxed. The boy's small hands stopped pushing, his tears slowed, and his breathing evened. The father, standing at the doorway, could hardly believe what he was seeing. No professional, no medicine, no toy had done this. And yet here, in the quiet power of patience, it happened. Days passed like this. The woman's presence became part of the home's rhythm. The boy began to approach her, bringing small toys to show, leaning on her when tired. She never rushed him. She never judged him. She simply mirrored calmness and understanding. And slowly the father began to feel a change too. He noticed smiles. He noticed laughter, quiet at first, but there nonetheless. His son's world was opening, and for the first time he could see hope. It was not perfect. There were tears, fits, and nights filled with screams. But the father began to trust the process. He began to see the child's needs beyond his own frustration. He learned to step back, to observe, and to respect the boy's emotions without trying to control them. The woman taught this not by words, but by example. One evening, after dinner, the boy ran to her without hesitation. He placed his tiny hands in hers and looked up with eyes full of trust. The father watched, feeling a warmth he had not known in years. He realized that this was more than calming cries. This was building connection. This was healing a bond that had been broken. The woman also noticed the father. She did not interfere with his grief, but her calm presence began to touch him in ways he could not explain. He found himself sitting closer during bedtime, reading stories softly, listening instead of giving instructions. He began to understand that his son's pain was not a reflection of failure, but a call for love and patience. He also began to reflect on his own life. In boardrooms, he had learned to assert control, to solve problems quickly, to measure success by numbers. But here nothing worked that way. Emotional connection could not be bought or commanded. He needed time, patience, and understanding. He realized that these skills, though simple, were the most important he had ever ignored. Weeks turned into months, and small victories became apparent. The boy no longer screamed at every change. He began to play more freely, exploring rooms, talking softly, giggling at simple things. The father joined in when he could, sometimes hesitant, sometimes clumsy, but always learning. The woman remained a silent guide, never forcing, never directing, but gently encouraging both father and son. There were moments of frustration. Nights still had tears. Days had setbacks. But the household began to feel alive again, filled with movement, sound, and tentative joy. The father noticed it in himself too. He slept better, smiled more, and began to speak gently to his son, instead of only giving instructions. He realized that healing was a process, not a moment, and patience was the key. One rainy afternoon, the father watched the boy sitting by the window, quietly coloring with crayons. The woman sat nearby, reading a book, letting the child work at his own pace. The father saw that his son's eyes were bright, that his hands were steady, that a quiet confidence had started to replace fear. It was subtle, but it was real. For the first time, the father believed that joy could return to their lives. The boy looked up, saw his father, and ran to him. There was no hesitation, no push, no cry, just a small, trusting embrace. The father held him, feeling the weight of months of sorrow lift, if only slightly. He whispered words he had never thought to say before, words that had no place in business meetings, but everything to do with love. He promised to be there, to listen, and to try harder. The woman smiled quietly in the background. She had done her work not through force or authority, but through understanding, patience, and presence. She had reminded the father of something he had forgotten, that love cannot be hurried, bought, or demanded. It must be felt, shared, and nurtured. Evening fell, and the house felt different. Not perfect, but alive. Not complete, but growing. The father knew challenges were ahead, yet he also knew that the first real step toward healing had been taken. And he understood that this ordinary woman, through ordinary acts of care, had changed the life of his family in a way he could never have imagined. One morning, the father woke up to the sound of laughter coming from the living room. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it was a dream. The boy was not only awake, but playing with his small blocks. Stacking them carefully while humming a tune he had clearly made up himself. The woman sat nearby, watching quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She smiled gently when she saw the father standing at the doorway, unsure whether to enter or not. It was a small moment, but it meant everything. For months, the house had been filled with cries and silence. Now, laughter, even a small amount, brought a tear to the father's eye. He realized he had almost forgotten how it felt to hear pure joy coming from his child. He stepped into the room slowly, not wanting to disturb the fragile peace. The boy looked up, saw him, and ran forward. The father caught him in his arms, holding him close. For the first time in months, there was no crying, no fear, only trust. The child rested his head on his father's shoulder and whispered something that only he could understand. The father felt a rush of emotion he had not felt in years, a mix of relief, hope, and love. The woman watched quietly, not intervening. She knew that this moment was theirs alone, the bond between father and son growing stronger. She had only created the space for it to happen, and now she let them take it naturally. Her presence was calm, steady, like the gentle rhythm of a heart. But she remained in the background, never drawing attention to herself. Later that day, the father decided to speak with the woman. He wanted to understand how she had achieved what so many others could not. He found her in the kitchen, cleaning quietly, her movements calm and deliberate. He cleared his throat, nervous but determined. "How do you do it?" he asked. "He's never been like this with anyone else." She looked up at him, her eyes soft but steady. "I don't do anything magical," she said. "I just listen. I let him feel what he feels. I don't try to fix it immediately. I let him know he's safe, that it's okay to cry, to be scared, to feel alone, and I don't leave." The father nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He realized that all his years of success had taught him to fix problems quickly, to control situations, to solve things with precision. But a child's heart was not a problem to be solved. It was a delicate world of feelings, a landscape of trust, fear, and love that required patience and presence, not money or authority. Over the next few days, the father tried to apply what he had learned. He sat quietly while his son played, sometimes reading a book aloud, sometimes simply watching. He let the child come to him when ready, never forcing interaction. At first it felt awkward, even uncomfortable. He had grown used to control and certainty, and now he had to wait and see. But slowly he began to feel the rewards of his patience. The boy began to approach him more often, bringing small toys, asking simple questions, and even sharing his little victories. The father found himself laughing at things that once would have seemed trivial. The sound of his son's laughter became a melody he could not stop listening to. He realized that these small, quiet moments were more valuable than any deal, any success, any luxury he had ever achieved. One evening, the boy fell asleep in the father's arms after a day filled with play and gentle guidance. The father held him close, feeling the rise and fall of his chest, the warmth of his small body. He whispered softly, promising to be there, to listen, to try harder. He felt a deep sense of connection he had almost forgotten, a bond that had been buried under grief and fear. The woman continued her work, silently guiding them through this transformation. She noticed the father's progress, the subtle changes in how he spoke to his son, the way he reacted to frustration with patience instead of anger. She also saw the boy's growth, the way he laughed more easily, the way he expressed his feelings without fear, the way he began to trust not only her but also his father. One rainy afternoon, the father watched as the boy sat by the window, drawing pictures of their small family. The woman sat nearby, reading quietly, allowing the child to express himself freely. The father realized that this moment was not just about calming cries or quieting fears. It was about creating a space where love could grow, where trust could be rebuilt, where a family could begin to heal. He reflected on the months that had passed. The house, once cold and silent, was now filled with light and warmth. The boy's laughter, once rare, had become a regular sound. The father had learned to be patient, to listen, to understand the depth of emotions he had ignored for so long. And he knew that none of this would have been possible without the quiet, steady presence of the woman who had entered their lives without fanfare, without expectation, and without judgment. The father also began to see changes in himself beyond the walls of his home. He approached work with a new perspective, understanding that not all problems could be solved with money or authority. He learned to value patience, empathy, and presence, qualities he had long overlooked. He realized that the lessons he was learning at home were more important than any deal, any contract, any achievement he had ever known. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, the father and son sat together on the porch, watching the world quietly. The boy leaned against his father, feeling safe and loved. The father held him close, feeling a sense of peace he had almost forgotten. He glanced at the woman inside, quietly preparing dinner, and felt gratitude beyond words. She had not only calmed his son, but had also shown him the way back to his own heart. The days continued, each one bringing small victories, small moments of connection. The boy's cries became less frequent, replaced by laughter and conversation. The father learned to navigate the delicate balance of guiding without controlling, listening without judging, and loving without conditions. And through it all, the woman remained a steady presence, a reminder that patience and understanding could heal wounds that money and authority never could. the house. Once a place of silence and sorrow, was now alive with the sounds of a family slowly coming back together. The father knew that challenges would still come, that nights would still have tears, that growth would never be perfect. But he also knew that they were on a new path, one guided by love, trust, and the quiet power of presence. And for the first time in a long time, he felt hope, real hope, that his family could truly heal and be whole again. Days and weeks passed, and the changes in the household became more visible. The father noticed that the boy had begun to trust him more openly. He would run to his father for comfort without hesitation, and his laughter now filled spaces that had once been silent. These moments were small, quiet, but they were powerful. Each one chipped away at the wall of fear and sadness that had surrounded them for so long. The father, for his part, was learning new ways to connect. He had always been a man of action, used to solving problems quickly and decisively. But here, in his home, he found that patience, presence, and listening were far more powerful. He would sit on the floor, playing with blocks or reading books, letting his son take the lead. Sometimes, the boy would ignore him completely, absorbed in his own world, and the father learned to wait without frustration, understanding that attention given too soon could push the child away. The woman remained a quiet guide. She did not intervene unless needed, but her calm and steady presence influenced both father and son in ways that were almost invisible. She taught the father through example, showing how to be patient, how to listen, how to respect emotions rather than dismiss them. She never spoke condescendingly, never offered advice that felt forced. Instead, she let the father discover his own capacity to love and nurture. Gently nudging him toward understanding, one evening, the father decided to take his son to the park. The boy had been reluctant to leave the house at first, but he eventually agreed, holding his father's hand with trust. The father watched him run, explore, and laugh, and he felt a sense of joy that he had not known in years. He realized that these outings were more than recreation. They were opportunities to build a bond, to create memories, and to teach his son that the world was not a place to fear. At the park, the boy discovered a small bird trapped in the grass. Without hesitation, he ran to it, and the father followed closely behind. They watched as the boy gently helped the bird back onto its feet. It was a simple act, but the father saw a reflection of his own child's growth, a child learning empathy, patience, and courage. He felt pride that was not tied to achievement or status, but to the development of character and heart. Back at home, the boy began sharing stories about his day, his discoveries, and his thoughts. The father listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes remaining silent. He realized that listening was as much an act of love as any embrace or word of comfort. And as he listened, he began to see the depth of his child's personality, the complexity of his emotions, and the intelligence behind his curiosity. The woman observed quietly, satisfied with the progress, but aware that more work remained. She noticed the father's own growth, the way he handled frustration with calm, the way he encouraged exploration, the way he celebrated small victories. She also noticed moments when he struggled, moments when old habits of control and impatience resurfaced. But she never judged, never criticized. She simply continued to provide a model of steady, caring presence. One night the boy woke up crying. The father rushed to his side, expecting the usual rejection or resistance. But this time, something was different. The child reached out to him, letting him pick him up without protest. The father held him close, whispering soft words of comfort. He realized that the boy had begun to trust him not because of grand gestures, but because of consistent presence and care over time. The father reflected on the woman's role in all this. He had initially underestimated her, thinking that no ordinary person could make a lasting difference in their lives. But now he understood that her strength was quiet, patient, and unwavering. She had shown him that love was not about grand gestures or instant results, but about consistency, empathy, and respect. Days turned into months, and the boy's growth continued. He began to play with other children, showing confidence and curiosity. He expressed his feelings more openly, laughed more freely. and approached life with a sense of wonder that had been buried under grief. The father marveled at these changes, realizing that the family he thought was broken could, in fact, whole and grow stronger. The father also noticed changes within himself. He approached his work with a different mindset, understanding that not all challenges could be solved with force or authority. He became more patient with colleagues, more understanding with clients, and more willing to listen before acting. He recognized that the lessons he was learning at home were applicable beyond the walls of his house, shaping him into a more compassionate and empathetic person. The boys' laughter, once rare, had become a regular presence in the home. The father cherished these moments, understanding their fragility and importance. He spent evenings reading stories, playing games, and simply being present. Realizing that these small acts were far more meaningful than any wealth or success he had achieved, the woman remained a quiet, guiding presence, never seeking recognition or praise. She understood that her role was not to be noticed, but to create the conditions for growth, healing, and connection. And through her patience, empathy, and steady presence, she had helped the father and son rediscover each other, rebuilding a bond that had been strained and wounded. As the months continued, the household transformed. The walls that had once echoed with cries now resonated with laughter, conversation, and shared moments of joy. The father realized that healing was not a single event, but a continuous process, nurtured by patience, understanding, and unconditional care. He looked at his son, asleep in his bed one evening, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had learned that true connection required humility, patience, and presence. He had learned that love was not about control or perfection, but about acceptance, empathy, and trust. And he knew that the woman who had entered their lives quietly and without expectation had been the catalyst for this transformation. The father understood that the journey was not over. Challenges would still arise, tears would still fall, and growth would continue in small, incremental steps. But he also knew that the foundation had been laid for a future filled with love, trust, and connection, and he was determined to continue building upon it, guided by the lessons he had learned and the quiet, unwavering example of the woman who had changed their lives forever. The morning sun filled the house with warmth, and the father watched as his son played quietly on the floor. Blocks were stacked carefully, and a small smile danced across the boy's face. The father felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that months of patience, care, and understanding had brought them to this moment. He glanced at the woman standing nearby, silently observing, and realized that her presence had been the guiding light. Through their journey, the father reflected on how far they had come. The boy's cries, once constant and piercing, had become rare. Laughter now filled spaces that had been silent, and the house, once cold and empty, was alive with warmth, love, and connection. He understood that this transformation was not due to wealth, power, or control, but because someone had taken the time to listen, to be present, and to guide with empathy. The father knelt down to his son's level, joining him in play. He did not instruct or correct, but simply observed and participated when invited. The boy smiled up at him, sharing small victories and discoveries with excitement. It was a simple moment, but it was powerful, a sign of trust, connection, and emotional growth. The father felt a sense of pride that was pure, untainted by expectations or achievement, simply rooted in love. Throughout the day, small victories continued. The boy shared stories, expressed emotions freely, and sought comfort when needed. The father responded with patience and understanding, remembering the lessons he had learned from the woman. He realized that his role was not to control or fix, but to nurture, support, and love unconditionally. One afternoon, the father took his son on a walk through the garden. The boy ran freely, exploring flowers and insects, while the father followed, offering gentle guidance and encouragement. They paused to watch butterflies dance in the sunlight, and the boy's laughter echoed through the garden. In that moment, the father felt a profound sense of peace and connection. He realized that true wealth was not measured in money, but in the bonds of love and trust he shared with his son. The woman continued her quiet work, providing guidance without interference. She watched as the father grew more confident, more patient, and more empathetic. He learned to handle frustration with calm, to celebrate small victories, and to embrace the unpredictability of childhood with grace. Her influence was subtle but powerful, shaping the dynamics of the household without ever seeking recognition. Evenings were now filled with stories, laughter, and gentle conversations. The father read to his son, sometimes making up tales that sparked imagination and wonder. The boy listened intently, occasionally asking questions or offering ideas. These interactions, once rare and difficult, had become natural and joyous. The father felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he was present in his son's life in a way he had never been before. One night, after a day filled with play and connection, the boy fell asleep in his father's arms. The father held him close, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing and the warmth of his small body. He whispered softly, promising to always be there, to listen, and to love. He realized that his journey was not just about calming cries or building trust, but about creating a foundation of love that would last a lifetime. The father reflected on the woman's impact. She had entered their lives quietly, without expectation, and had shown them the power of patience, empathy, and presence. She had not only calmed his son, but had also guided him to become a more compassionate, understanding, and loving parent. He realized that her influence would stay with them long after she was gone, shaping the way they loved, connected, and supported each other. In the following weeks, the father and son continued to grow together. They explored new places, learned new skills, and shared countless moments of joy and discovery. The father learned to celebrate the small victories, to embrace the challenges, and to be fully present in the moment. He discovered a depth of love and connection that he had never known, a bond that could not be measured or quantified, only felt. The boy's laughter became a constant presence in the house, a symbol of healing, trust, and love. The father cherished each moment, knowing how fragile and precious it was. He had learned that true connection required patience, understanding, and empathy, and he was committed to nurturing it every day. The woman, having completed her work, prepared to leave the household. She had achieved what no one else could. She had calmed the child, healed the father, and rebuilt a family through quiet, steady guidance. Before leaving, she spoke to the father, her voice gentle and sincere. "You have done the work," she said. "I only guided you. The love, patience, and connection you have built will carry you forward. Continue to be present, continue to listen, and continue to love. That is all that truly matters." Father thanked her, tears in his eyes. He realized that her presence had not only changed his son's life, but had transformed him as well. He was no longer the distant, frustrated parent he had been. He was a father who understood, who listened, who loved deeply and patiently. And he knew that this transformation would shape their lives forever. As the woman departed, the father and son continued their daily routines, now filled with laughter, trust, and connection. The father read stories, played games, and shared quiet moments with his son, fully present and engaged. The boy grew more confident, expressive, and joyful each day. Knowing that he was loved and understood, the father reflected on the journey they had traveled. From nights filled with cries and frustration to days of laughter, trust, and connection, they had transformed not through wealth or authority, but through patience, empathy, and presence. He realized that true change comes not from external solutions but from within. From the consistent, loving actions that build trust, security, and connection. The house, once cold and silent, was now filled with warmth, love, and life. The father had become the parent he had always hoped to be, and the boy had found safety, comfort, and joy. The woman's quiet influence had set the stage. But the real work, the daily acts of love and presence, was carried forward by the father in the end. The millionaire had been changed forever, not by money, power, or success, but by the quiet, steady presence of someone who cared deeply and understood the true nature of love. The boy had been calmed, healed, and nurtured. The father had discovered a depth of connection and love he had never known. Together, they faced the future with hope, patience, and unwavering love. The cries that had once filled the house were gone, replaced by laughter, conversation, and the simple, profound joy of being together. And the father knew, in the quiet moments of reflection, that life would never be the same again, not because of wealth or status, but because of love, presence, and the power of human connection. Months passed since the woman had left the household, yet her impact remained deeply embedded in the life of the father and his son. The father had fully embraced his role, showing a level of patience, empathy, and understanding he had never experienced before. The boy, once overwhelmed by grief and fear, had blossomed into a joyful, curious child. Confident in the love that surrounded him, each morning began with a small ritual that had become a cherished part of their lives. The father would enter the boy's room quietly, whispering greetings and gently waking him. They would share breakfast together, talk about dreams, or plan small adventures for the day. These routines, simple as they seemed, became the foundation of trust and stability the child had once lacked. The father had learned to observe his son closely, noticing small changes in mood, subtle expressions, and even the smallest gestures. A tilt of the head, a frown, or a sudden silence was enough to prompt his attention, and he responded not with correction or instruction, but with gentle questions, patience, and understanding. He had discovered the depth of listening, and it became his greatest tool in guiding his son through the complexities of childhood. The boy's laughter now filled the house regularly. It was spontaneous, joyful, and sincere. The father took every opportunity to encourage play, creativity, and exploration. They built forts from blankets, created imaginary worlds, and shared stories that sparked imagination and wonder. These moments became not just play, but essential acts of bonding, moments where love was expressed and connections strengthened. Evenings were a time of reflection and togetherness. The father would read to his son, sometimes choosing books that explored emotions, courage, and friendship. They discussed the characters, their choices, and how the boy might feel in similar situations. These discussions helped the child develop empathy, emotional intelligence, and an understanding of himself and others. The father marveled at how far they had come, realizing that these small, thoughtful interactions were as important as any grand act of care. Occasionally, challenges arose. The boy, despite his growth, would experience frustration, fear, or sadness. The father met these moments with calm, never allowing his own stress to override the child's needs. He had learned that it was not about solving the problem immediately, but about being present, listening, and validating feelings. This approach had created a secure environment where the child felt understood and supported. The father's work life had changed as well. He approached business and social interactions with a newfound patience and empathy. He listened more, valued people beyond their utility, and considered the emotional and personal dimensions of decisions. The lessons learned at home had expanded into every aspect of his life, reminding him that true success included emotional intelligence and human connection. The boy's confidence grew steadily. He began exploring new activities, making friends, and expressing his thoughts freely. He shared discoveries, asked questions, and even comforted others when he saw someone in distress. The father recognized these qualities as a direct result of the environment of patience, love, and presence they had cultivated together. Holidays and special occasions became opportunities for shared joy and family traditions. They created rituals, from baking together to simple evening walks, that reinforced connection and happiness. The father took care to ensure that the boy felt involved, respected, and celebrated. These experiences solidified the sense of belonging and security that had once been missing. School days brought new challenges, but the father was prepared. He communicated with teachers, guided the child in handling social situations, and taught resilience through understanding rather than punishment. The boy learned that emotions were natural and manageable, that seeking help was acceptable, and that trust in relationships was a source of strength. The father reflected often on the journey they had traveled, from the earliest days of grief, fear, and endless crying, to the current reality of laughter, curiosity, and emotional openness, the transformation was remarkable. He realized that the foundation of their change had been the quiet guidance of the woman who had entered their lives without fanfare, teaching through presence rather than instruction. Even in her absence, the principles she had instilled continued to guide them: patience, empathy, listening, and unconditional love. The father now understood that these values were not temporary solutions, but lifelong skills, essential for nurturing the child and sustaining a meaningful connection. One evening, as the sun set and the sky glowed with orange and pink, the father and son sat on the porch, watching the world in silence. The boy leaned against his father, holding his hand, while the father reflected on the profound change in both their lives. Tears of gratitude welled in his eyes, not for wealth or success, but for the gift of connection, love, and trust that they now shared. The father had become more than a provider. He was a mentor, a protector, and a source of unconditional love. He understood his son's emotions, guided him gently, and celebrated his individuality. The boy had grown into a happy, secure child, filled with curiosity, compassion, and confidence. The journey had not been easy. There had been setbacks, tears, and moments of doubt. But every challenge had reinforced the value of patience, presence, and empathy. The father now embraced challenges as opportunities to nurture, connect, and grow alongside his son. In quiet moments, the father sometimes thought of the woman who had guided them. He realized that her influence would forever be part of their story. Her teachings were embedded in their daily lives, her example a constant reminder that the smallest acts of presence could create profound change. The boy, now thriving, approached life with wonder and trust. The father approached parenthood with love, patience, and humility. Together, they had built a home filled with warmth, joy, and connection, a home where emotions were acknowledged. Laughter was shared and love was unconditional. The father understood. Finally, that true transformation was not about wealth, power, or control. It was about being present, listening, and responding with love. The cries that had once filled the house were replaced by joy, conversation, and shared experiences. Their lives had been changed forever, not by money, but by human connection, care, and understanding, and in the quiet of their home, filled with warmth and laughter. The father and son knew that they were no longer broken, no longer alone, and forever transformed by the quiet, steady presence that had guided them through their journey of healing, love, and growth. The seasons changed, and with them, the boy grew older, more confident, and more aware of the world around him. The father noticed these changes every day, sometimes in small gestures, a confident stride across the room, a proud announcement of a drawing, or a gentle act of kindness towards someone else. The boy's world had expanded, yet the foundation of love and trust remained solid. Built carefully over months of patience, empathy, and presence, the father reflected often on how different life had become. Gone were the endless nights of crying and fear. Gone were the feelings of frustration and helplessness that had once dominated his days. Now, the house was alive with laughter, conversation, and shared experiences. The bond between father and son had deepened to a level that was profound, intimate, and unshakable. One afternoon, the father took the boy to a small park they had discovered months earlier. The boy ran ahead, his laughter carrying across the open space. The father watched, smiling, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. He realized that this joy, this confidence, was something money could never buy. It was a gift born of love, presence, and consistency. The boy approached a small group of children playing near the swings. At first, he hesitated, watching them closely, but then he joined in, sharing his toys and ideas. The father observed, impressed by his son's newfound social confidence. He knew this had come not from lessons or instruction, but from the secure environment they had created together, a home filled with patience, understanding, and unconditional love. As the day progressed, they explored the park together, examining plants, chasing butterflies, and laughing at the simplest things. The father realized how important it was to celebrate these small moments, to acknowledge the beauty in everyday life. He understood that connection and joy were built in these quiet, unassuming moments. Back at home, the father continued to apply the lessons he had learned from the woman who had once guided them. He listened actively, responded with empathy, and allowed the boy to express his emotions freely. The boy had learned that feelings were natural and valid, that his father would always be present, and that he was loved unconditionally. These lessons extended beyond the home, shaping how the child approached school, friends, and new experiences. One evening, the father sat with his son on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. They spoke quietly about the day, about discoveries, and about emotions. The father asked gentle questions, encouraging reflection and understanding. The boy responded openly, confident in the knowledge that his thoughts and feelings were respected. The father thought back to the early days, when he had felt lost, frustrated, and overwhelmed. He remembered the nights of crying, the rejection, and the fear. And now he marveled at how far they had come. The transformation was not instantaneous, but gradual, built through countless small acts of love, patience, and understanding. The boy had also begun to show empathy toward others. He comforted friends, shared toys, and spoke kindly to those in distress. The father recognized these behaviors as a reflection of the secure environment and the consistent guidance he had provided. He understood that emotional intelligence was cultivated through example, through patient nurturing, and through consistent caring presence. The father's approach to life had shifted as well. He no longer measured success solely by wealth, status, or achievement. Instead, he valued connection, understanding, and compassion. His relationships with colleagues, friends, and family had improved as he applied the lessons he had learned at home: listening, empathizing, and responding with patience. School presented new challenges for the boy, yet he approached them with curiosity and confidence. He communicated effectively with teachers, expressed his needs clearly, and demonstrated resilience in the face of difficulty. The father provided guidance without pressure, allowing the child to learn and grow independently while knowing that support was always available. Holidays and celebrations became opportunities for shared joy and bonding. They created traditions: baking together, evening walks, storytelling that reinforced the sense of family and connection. The father celebrated his son's achievements, both big and small, emphasizing the value of effort, creativity, and emotional growth over mere success. The father reflected on the woman who had entered their lives months earlier. Her influence had been profound, yet subtle. She had guided them with patience, empathy, and a steady presence, teaching lessons that could not be learned through words alone. The father felt gratitude, knowing that her impact would continue to shape their lives for years to come. The boy, now thriving, faced the world with curiosity, confidence, and empathy. He had learned to navigate emotions, express himself, and connect with others. The father transformed as well, embraced the role of guide, protector, and mentor, committed to nurturing growth, resilience, and love in his child. Even in ordinary moments, the father and son found joy in connection. Simple activities, preparing meals, reading books, tending to plants, became meaningful opportunities to share, teach, and learn. The father recognized that these small moments were as significant as grand achievements, shaping character, emotional intelligence, and the bonds of love. The father often thought about the journey they had taken together. From nights of endless crying and fear, 2 days filled with laughter, curiosity, and emotional connection, they had transformed their lives through patience, presence, and unwavering love. He realized that the greatest wealth he had ever known was the bond shared with his son. The boy had become not only happy and confident, but also compassionate and empathetic. He understood the value of connection, the importance of patience, and the power of listening. These lessons, learned in the safety of their home, would guide him through life, shaping his character, relationships, and approach to the world. The father, reflecting on his own growth, recognized the depth of his transformation. He had become more patient, empathetic, and present, He had learned to value connection and understanding above all else. He realized that the journey of healing and growth was ongoing. But the foundation had been firmly established through love, guidance, and consistent presence. As the sun set on another day, the father and son sat together quietly, feeling a sense of peace, connection, and hope. The boy leaned against his father, content and secure. The father held him close, grateful for the journey they had shared and the lessons they had learned. Together, they had built a life filled with love, laughter, and emotional richness, a life forever changed by presence, patience, and the power of human connection.